Superhero couples aren't always the most predictable of pairings, it's true. Some are seemingly downright forbidden, but happen anyway. Call it chemistry or call it comics. Starting off in a very weird place, Nightwing and Catwoman are not normally a pairing you think of when you imagine, well, probably either of these heroes. If anything, Selina should be more like a stepmother figure to Dick than anything else, and honestly, she usually is, so hence why this is very strange, considering how close she is to Batman and how Dick Grayson in the original continuity at least was, well, basically a kid when she first met him. But hey, this is comics. Time. What is time? And sometimes ships do get super weird, which includes, of course, this one. Although they were never a permanent couple, Catwoman has flirted with Nightwing before and even told him not to mention it to Batman. They basically kissed on some rafters. It was a whole weird thing. However, it seemed like her real motive here was kind of to like hit on Nightwing in the hopes of making Batman jealous. Yikes. Selina, please. I'm just fortunate that this relationship has never gone anywhere permanent. Thank goodness. This next couple is less weird, but still pretty weird. Honestly, what is the weirdest couple that you can think of? Let me know in the comments. I want to hear about it. And let me know if you think it's more or less weird than this next one, or than the last one. The last one was pretty weird, to be honest. Power Princess and Hulk are maybe not a pairing you would have guessed would have been on this list, but honestly, when I think of these two characters, their being together, for a night anyway, does make sense given what I know of them. However, it should be noted that they had to travel to a different dimension to make this happen. Power Princess ended up coming to the Ultimate Universe where she met Ultimate Hulk, and after fighting him, slept with him. At least it's very heavily implied. There have been a few different versions of Power Princess for those who aren't familiar with her. This one hails from the Squadron Supreme and is basically a Greek goddess, also going by the name of Princess Zarda. She's basically Marvel's version of Wonder Woman. If you were thinking that, yeah, she's basically that. And she initially had a relationship with Squadron Supreme member Hyperion, who was basically Marvel's Superman, or one of them anyways. They kind of have a few. Meanwhile, Ultimate Hulk is like 616 Hulk, but usually more raunchy and also gray. Hence why, although this is weird, it kinda does make sense. Heading over to the animated world of DC, this next couple is one that surprised me personally when I heard about it. Now you gotta keep in mind I'm coming from the comics here. I've heard of Superboy and Wonder Girl, but I never would have expected Superboy and Miss Martian to be a thing. I guess they do have a similar past when you consider that Miss Martian is an alien from another world, one of the last of her kind, and Superboy is a clone of an alien who was the last of his kind. So I guess close enough? These two were a strange pairing in the Young Justice animated series, and while some honestly love them together, others were also somewhat caught unawares and confused by this pairing in the series. What's even more bizarre is that this controversial ship was made canon in the comics recently when the two also started dating in the main comic book continuity as well. While many of the Young Justice relationships are not quite as concrete, I would say, this next relationship was honestly quite serious. Kitty Pryde and Star-Lord were such a serious couple that they literally almost were married. Yeah, they were engaged and it seemed like they may even actually end up together and tie that knot, despite them initially having a weird long distance relationship at the beginning, with Star-Lord in space and Kitty of course down on Earth with the X-Men. Kitty came to space to rescue Peter, and for a while they had some fun space adventures together. They got engaged and Peter ended up inheriting his father's role as King of Spartax after his father was overthrown, and also after Kitty basically saved all of Spartax. Yeah, it was a crazy thing. And if you're wondering, yeah, it is kinda like in the MCU where Peter, yeah, still has father issues. His dad might not be Ego, a villain in the MCU who's also a planet, but instead he is the villain Jason, the former ruler of Spartax. Peter's time as ruler added strain onto many of his close relationships, including his relationship with Kitty, and so the relationship didn't end up lasting. And then Kitty was gonna marry Colossus and that also didn't happen, so yeah. Personally, I ship Kitty and Magic. I'm still waiting for that to happen. Going along with the lines of the oddness for me of Catwoman and Nightwing, we have this next couple. Now, if you're a fan of the Young Justice animated series, you likely have seen this one before, as you likely previously were familiar with Miss Martian and Superboy, and if you didn't know about it, I would be surprised. Especially if you say that you've watched Young Justice. I'd be like, wait, but have you? But I've included it because, like I said, as someone who has yet to watch Young Justice, I know, I need to get on that. I hear you all in the comments where you're like, Amanda, why aren't you watching Young Justice? You need to watch all of Young Justice. I'll do it eventually. strangely. This relationship though did surprise the heck out of me as someone that isn't familiar with the show. Coming from the comics, Zatanna is often firmly shipped with John Constantine and sometimes in other animated series and the comics Batman. Considering that these characters are generally seen as being from an entirely different generation, seeing her shipped with Nightwing was honestly surprising to me. Apparently in the show it was also considered a controversial ship among fans, probably because of that comic book history. Let me know what you think of it in the comments. Are you here for Zatanna and Nightwing? How do you feel about this ship from Young Justice? How do you feel about all the ships from Young Justice? What's the best one? Should I watch Young Justice? The answer is definitely going to be yes. I doubt anyone will say no. This next one isn't as random, but most people would simply not think of these two getting together. But when you think about Wasp, honestly, it kind of seems possible. Seems like she kind of has a type. And when you think of Tony, well, I mean, his type is mainly just attractive ladies, of which he knows many. So honestly, kind of makes sense to me. It's not surprising that these two really got together. Also, they're both superheroes and Avengers, so they have that in common, as well as, of course, years of history working together, so they would know each other pretty well, you'd think. Still, this romance did end up feeling kind of random and shoehorned in, which is why most people probably don't think about it and forgot that it happened, or didn't know at all. That and the fact that Janet is so romantically linked to Hank Pym in our minds, even though their relationship ended up being honestly pretty toxic, so. In the comics anyways, not in the MCU, thank goodness. Coming up is a couple that surprisingly had quite a controversial relationship. Shazam and Stargirl is one that probably makes a lot of sense to folks out there, but it was actually considered to be pretty taboo when it first happened. At least in the superhero community, it was. This is because not everyone knows that Shazam, or Captain Marvel as he was formerly known, is Billy Batson in disguise. Most people think he's a grown adult superhero, although with how he behaves sometimes, it's odd that there aren't more people who are honestly suspicious of this really, but hey, I digress. Stargirl, however, doesn't have an alternate form. She always appears as her true age, looking like a teenage girl, because, well, she is a teenage girl. And I think you can see where the issue comes in, despite the fact that Billy and Courtney were actually around the same age. If not, actually I believe they were the exact same age. I think they were both 16 when they kind of started getting together. Their blossoming romance though had to be cut short when Billy refused to let slip the truth of his secret identity. To put his fellow heroes at ease and maintain his secret, he just basically decided to cut off their relationship. Although I think he also left the JSA after that, the Justice Society of America, so I don't know. Seems like a weird choice, but I guess, you know, probably shouldn't do that if you're going to tell people I'm actually a teenager. It's fine. It's still a weird thing, even if you are a teenager, to be honest. I was surprised at how well this next very randomly seeming couple worked. She-Hulk is the character that I know quite a bit about when it comes to her romantic history. I've done a few videos talking about She-Hulk here on the channel and her romantic past, but this is a relationship I never would have guessed would have worked for her, and yet it really kind of did. Honestly, when I was reading this comic, I was like, wow, what a random pairing. There's so many other people I'd rather see She-Hulk with, but they won me over in the end. This relationship comes to us from the previous 2021 She-Hulk series. I think Marvel relaunched She-Hulk recently. I think there's a new 2023 series or something like that, but it's with the same creative team though. I need to go and read it. I need to get caught up on my She-Hulk, so pardon me. So we're back to one now, and back to Sensational She-Hulk. That's the new title for the relaunch, but the new old title. But in the previous run by the same team, we saw Jen return not just to her job as a lawyer working to defend superheroes, but we also saw her return to having a relationship with a character who was long believed to be dead, Jack of Hearts. And this time their relationship was not just as colleagues and friends, it gets quite romantic. How is this possible given Jack's powers? Well, they've actually been nullified, which means that he can touch Jennifer without having to worry about interfering with her gamma radiation, because that was a whole issue, especially the last time they were together, and it's recapped in the comic as well for you if you didn't know about it. And honestly, Jack's romantic, kind, and gentle nature works really well with Jennifer's sensitive yet very go-getter, kick butt attitude. I actually really liked them together in the end. Next up is a relationship that recently resurfaced. Dick Grayson wasn't always Dick Grayson, in case you forgot. If you did forget, I'm sorry that I have to remind you about this. There was a time when he forgot who he was and he went by the name of Rick. It was during this time that he had a romance with Bea, a bartender, or Beatrice. Well, neither of them ever felt fully comfortable opening up to each other, and Rick was somewhat unable to due to his, of course, his memory loss. It was recently revealed in the Nightwing series that Bea had her own secrets. Turns out Bea was the adoptive daughter of Reuben Blood, the quartermaster of the Hold. The Hold is a secret seafaring organization and bank, a very secure bank, which also guards some of the most valuable treasure in all of Bloodhaven. Recently, the Quartermaster was killed, and it was revealed that Beatrice was actually his daughter, B. Blood, or Captain Blood, and in learning of her backstory, we discovered there was more to Nightwing's ex than meets the eye. I'm excited to share this final couple with you, and also, it's reminding me again how I really need to read through all the Jed MacKay Black Cat stuff. Honestly, it just looks so good. Fun fact, Black Cat is another one of my bi babes in the comics. What is a bi babe, Amanda, you may ask? A bi babe is a bisexual character who is also a babe. Spoiler alert, most bisexuals happen to be babes, whether they be men, women, or any other gender, just FYI. At least according to Amanda. These are the rules according to Amanda. All the bi babes. Black Cat is one of that amazing group, and in the last few years we've also gotten to know more about her romantic relationships that she's had in the past. A lot of the ones that we never even knew about. Most people know her as simply an ex of Spider-Man, but Black Cat has had many love affairs over the years, of which Peter is merely one. He's merely one of them. It was established in canon that Tamara Blake was one such paramour of Black Cat's. We learned this in Jed MacKay's Black Cat series when Blake herself, an internationally known thief, resurfaced as the Iron Cat. Also, Black Cat and Iron Cat, like, I just mean, who doesn't ship that? That just sounds good on paper.
Now, starting off the list today, the third volume of Secret Avengers is an interesting comic. Honestly, it's quite good, but something I don't believe I will ever come to understand is how we got a plot line that saw MODOK, the mechanized organism designed only for killing, becoming part of the Avengers, and then he saves the day by crushing hard on the at-the-time director of S.H.I.E.L.D., Maria Hill. And she actually seems to reciprocate. MODOK saves the day from a cosmic monstrosity and a mad scientist by using his strong romantic feelings for Maria Hill to overpower their influence. Now, after this big murderous head proclaims his love to a seemingly unconscious Maria Hill, you'd expect her to be kind of uncomfortable upon coming to learn this info, but instead she walks up to his house the next day to have a chat that genuinely sounds like she's considering trying to date the reformed villain, especially because she goes inside his house for tea. Someone on the internet referred to Maria Hill as one of the most emotionally repressed characters to ever grace Marvel's pages, so pairing her up with MODOK actually sort of works in some kind of weird way. Now, taking place in Birds of Prey Volume 1, number 31, Ra's al Ghul decided that he needed a bit of a change to his life. Barbara Gordon, Oracle, sent her detective friend Jason Bard to follow her teammate at the time, Black Canary, as she had started seeing a mysterious rich older man, and Barbara was worried that something wasn't quite right. That was some great Bat Family intuition, as that rich older man turned out to be frickin' Ra's al Ghul. Ra's was masquerading as a count and wanted to seduce Black Canary into marrying him and joining the League of Assassins, which, okay man, you do you. Now, Canary, really weirdly, was actually pretty into him at first, but the relationship took a bit of a turn when she found out about his goal of manipulating and turning her to the dark side, and so naturally, she rejected his advances. Instead, Ra's tries to change her mind by stealing her away and taking her to the Lazarus pits in hopes of destroying her mind and making her susceptible to his advances. Now, luckily, Oracle arrived in time to stop Ra's al Ghul, but in the ensuing battle, Laurel, Black Canary, was injured. Barbara put her into the pit to save her, and as a side effect, Black Canary regained her canary cry, which is a good thing. Now, although she is better known for her long-standing relationship with Daredevil, Elektra and Frank Castle, the Punisher, once became a power couple. Which is so weird because, let's be honest, Elektra is not exactly a full-on good guy. Sure, you could say the same for Frank Castle, but his whole thing is wiping out criminals, and that's kind of what she is, just saying. Either way, it happened, and as you might expect for these two, it kind of ended in tragedy. Their relationship was revealed to us in 2013's Thunderbolts number 7 after Deadpool hits on Elektra, and she turns him down by revealing that she was already hitting the hay with Punisher. Now, back in Punisher number 27, Frank had been targeting the hideouts of various different mob members, only to find Elektra had already taken out everyone each time he showed up. When he crashed the penthouse of a mob boss named Vic Strega, Punisher arrived just in time to watch Elektra cut the man's heart out. He then asked her out, and Punisher had Strega's heart bronzed and gave it to Elektra as a romantic gesture in Thunderbolts number 30, which is weird. Unfortunately, the end came when the Punisher took it upon himself to end the life of Elektra's criminal brother, and I mean, the two just couldn't really see eye to eye after that one. Not sure why. Now listen, no one will ever love you as much as you love yourself. Or at least if you're someone as insane as Harley Quinn, that is absolutely the case. Proven by the fact that she actually dated herself from another universe. Taking place in the miniseries Harley's Little Black Book, which actually detailed a few of Quinn's weird relationships like the one with Lobo, Harley Quinn found herself in a romantic situation with herself. Specifically, the version of herself from DC's Bombshells, who was honestly drastically different from the main universe Harley at this time. Them being so different from one another made it a little bit less weird, but it's still kinda weird. It kind of almost reminds me of Loki falling for Sylvie in the Loki TV show, although Harley's Little Black Book definitely came way before and was way less serious. Now moving on, while the Scarlet Witch is known by many to have had her biggest love interests in the form of Vision and even Wonder Man, when she first ever joined on the Avengers, she actually had a big old crush on Captain America. This was pretty quickly forgotten about in place of Vision coming into her life, but way later on, Wanda and her early crush Capsicle got their time in the pink light of love. The pair began a quiet romance in Captain America and the Falcon #6, but unfortunately, Wanda can go a little crackerjack bonkers from time to time, and their relationship started shortly before Avengers Disassembled, which saw Wanda go bananas and wipe out multiple Avengers and led directly to the House of M and eventually M-Day. Needless to say, the two did not stick together. Now, sometime after the hero Tigra, or whatever you want to call her, had become romantically involved with teammates Henry Pym and Wonder Man at the same time when on the West Coast Avengers, during Secret Invasion, Tigra began dating who she thought was Hank Pym. He actually ended up being a Skrull imposter named Kriti Null. And then, he actually turned out to be a clone of a Skrull imposter named Kriti Null. So, Tigra was dating a clone of a shapeshifting alien who was pretending to be a fellow Avenger. And then, she discovered that she was pregnant. Understandably, Tigra was very fearful of the child she was carrying due to the father being a Skrull. Sorry, a clone of a Skrull. She did eventually give birth to a healthy, normal baby boy named William. Normal in that he was also kind of a cat person. William is genetically Hank Pym's son, so Tigra took him to meet his sister Nadia Van Dyne at her birthday party. When the real Hank Pym returned, he had no memory of the relationship or any clue that he was now technically a father, but unlike a lot of relationships in comics, Hank and Tigra embarked on a real, mature relationship where they even discussed their hopes and fears and expectations of each other, and from that point could move on to build a future together. But alas, the relationship was pretty much forgotten after the cancellation of Avengers Academy, where most of it took place. Now listen, sometimes the best and most impactful of romantic partners walk into our lives through mere happenstance. And other times, that fateful romantic partner is quite literally the devil, and that unfortunately is what happened to the mutant known as Magma. During the Fear Itself event, when the New Mutants were trying to get to the Norse realm of Hell, that is spelled with one L, to help Hela and Danny Moonstar, the mutant Cypher had his own powers somehow fail him, and he messed up the teleportation spell, accidentally saying Hell with two L's instead. The mutants, among whom was Magma, landed in Mephisto's realm of Hell, and she made a deal with him in order to get sent to the right place. The deal she made was to go on a date with Mephisto. Understandably, she didn't enjoy this date because she was also understandably a little scared of being duped or tricked. The biggest twist though happens when Mephisto confronts her about it and reveals that because his appearance is based on a person's perception of him, he still experiences a full spectrum of human emotions, including love, and he legit just wanted to have a normal date. And then after that, they begin actually casually dating until she finds out about his ownership of the Desir. That is the thing that did it for her, not the whole he's the devil. Weird. And moving out from that weird relationship, in Age of X-Men Extremists, Fred Dukes, also known as the Blob, has gone from being a dumb, evil, and slightly uncomfortable villain to a granola bar road trip dad in the Age of X-Men. And alongside that, he's caught the eye of someone a lot of you nerds would spend countless moments salivating over: Psylocke. Don't lie, I know it's true. Now this new Blob and Psylocke are a pairing that actually works way better than you might think. But for those of you wondering why or how this happened, the writer of this comic, Leah Williams, actually answered that for us. Responding to a Redditor who asked the very question of why or how Psylocke would end up with the Blob in AOX, she's not in a really good mental place before AOX considering everything, and then being brainwashed on top of that for the storyline of AOX isn't going to make things any better. She sort of feels like she's lucid dreaming. She's distant, aloof, and dreamy, but Blob in AOX is very different because of how this world affected him. He's warm and goofy and a bit of a daydreamer. Betsy immediately connects with his unabashed sense of self because it's something that she is lacking at that moment, and that's before she becomes fascinated by his attraction to her. She's looking at herself through his adoring eyes and using what she finds there to inform her sense of self. And there you have it. That's actually rather sweet. It didn't last though. Now, I'm sure most of you nerds do know about this next one, so this point is for 1, the people who didn't know, but 2, it's for me because I love it. Although you'd assume that the relationship between Otto Octavius and Spider-Man's Aunt May would be inherently kinda icky, it's actually surprisingly really pleasant, even though the pair weren't meant to last. Otto is shown to have a real and genuine affection for Aunt May, with the pair even almost getting married at one point, which is how most of you probably know about this whole debacle. Who you should really feel bad for here though is Peter Parker. While Peter has struggled with this little romance like most normal people might, except for this being a superhero issue, he's also had quite the unwanted peek into their relationship. In The Amazing Spider-Man number 699, where Otto swaps bodies with Peter Parker, Spider-Man is trapped in Otto's aunt-loving body, and what do you know, he also has access to Otto's memories, which leads to the lovely little moment where Peter gets a lovely little memory which appears to detail the villain and his aunt, pseudo-mom, going to the town of Pound. And lastly today, I'm ending this list off with another point I'm sure people know about, but I simply do not give a damn because it's great. In one alternate reality, the Greek demigod and Avenger, Hercules, and the mutant and also Avenger, Wolverine, were lovers. Fans met them when the X-Men formed the Extreme X-Men to hunt down evil versions of Professor X in different universes across the multiverse. Hailing from the reality of Earth 12025, this version of our feral mutant is the Governor General of the Dominion of Canada and Viceroy to Her Majesty's expedition to Shangri-La, whatever that means. He is like a version of Wolverine who is also mixed with President Theodore Roosevelt, and Hercules is his lover, partner, and adventure buddy. These two shared a love that was built after years and years of working together, becoming their world's greatest heroes, and their bond was so strong that Herc even gave James a super cool upgrade in the form of a skeleton made of adamantine, which is a godly golden metal even stronger than adamantium, which also made Wolverine completely indestructible and immune to telepathic attacks. Unfortunately though, at first they were forced to keep it secret because their queen forbade homosexual relationships and Zeus forbade any god but himself from consorting with mortals. But then they revealed the relationship anyways and fought side by side in the pits of Tartarus against damned souls until they were rescued 4 years later. Very cool.
Number 10. Wasp and Magneto. Wasp and Magneto. This is a relationship that blew my mind when I first found out about it. For me, it's been a few years now since I've known about this romance and first discovered it, but I'm sure most folks out there are kinda surprised to hear about it still, especially if you are newer to comics. This one was from the original Secret Wars event, where it was implied that Magneto and Wasp may have had a brief affair during the event, or at the very least had a flirtation going. It seems to me that Magneto just has mad riz and is basically able to charm just almost anyone in the romance department, regardless of if they're an ally to him or perhaps are even his enemy. Wasp herself was not entirely immune to his charms, it seems, though she did, I think, lean more into the romance in an attempt to survive and to potentially see if she could get vital information out of him. And friends, before we move on to our next spot on this list, if you love what we do here at Top 10 Nerd, be sure to let us know you love us by clicking that like button. Number 9. Cyclops and Psylocke. Cyclops is typically a hero you'd think of tied to Jean Grey, aka Marvel Girl, or maybe you prefer him with Emma Frost. Psylocke, on the other hand, has had a few different partners, with none of them being super iconic for me. She's been with Phantom X if I had to think of loves who perhaps were the most iconic for her, I guess. However, most people would never think of shipping Psylocke with Cyclops, especially when we consider that at one point she also kind of flirted with Havoc, I believe. But here we are, comics. Cyclops and Psylocke had a flirtation going strong in the early 90s. It was clear that they both wanted each other, with Psylocke even at times competing with Jean in an attempt to steal Scott away from her. Oh, the 90s. What a time of strange romances. Number 8. The Flash and Raven. The Flash and Raven are a couple most people do not think of when they think of Teen Titans, or as they are now, just Titans and their romances. The Flash and Raven are a couple most people do not think of when they think of romances in regards to the Teen Titans, or as they are known now, just Titans. Currently in the comics, Wally is married to the love of his life, Linda, and they also have their 2 kids back. And Raven is currently with Beast Boy in a very loving and accepting relationship on both sides, based on, what I've seen so far anyways. Both have sturdy partnerships that are basically relationship goals for many of us out there, I imagine. But there was a time when it seemed like Wally and Raven could actually be an item. However, it should be noted that mainly Raven was the one who wanted it to be with Wally, and Wally was kind of rightfully terrified of Raven. Needless to say, the romance didn't end up blossoming into anything. Number 7. Iron Man and Hellcat. Iron Man and Hellcat are another couple that most people don't think of when they think of either of these heroes. I mean, I know I didn't, at least not until recently, not until I saw it happen, and then I was kind of like, wait, what? Well, everyone has likely been talking about Iron Man and Emma Frost lately. Before that was going on, or rather I guess kind of in between when that was going on, Hellcat and Tony almost ended up engaged. Yeah, and can you imagine learning that you were almost engaged to someone and then they ended up marrying someone else? Sounds wild. Although also that sounds like comics. Granted, Hellcat was the one who turned Tony down. She did love him, she just wasn't ready to be married again, and considering her history with marriage, I gotta say, I get it. Number 6. Storm and Doctor Doom. For those who don't know about this bizarre flirtation, which has also consisted of at least one date, but one very strange date, and another more diplomatic dinner between the 2 rulers, though I'm sure Doom wanted it to be another date. This might seem like an odd pairing. But yes, this is a thing that happened, and oddly, it even kinda works as a ship, to be honest. Even though the date ended extremely poorly with Storm trapped in a chrome casing, her worst nightmare, as at the time, she was still suffering from claustrophobia. It's clear that there is chemistry between these 2. In fact, there is even an alternate reality where Doom successfully made Storm his queen, and the pair even have children together. Number 5. Raven and Wallace West. Raven and Wallace West is not a relationship I ever expected to see happen, especially when you consider these characters being from completely different eras in comics should in theory have a pretty large age gap between them. But this being comics, apparently that is something we're just kind of supposed to ignore. It's especially weird though when you consider that, as I previously mentioned, yes, Raven used to have the hots for Wally West, Wallace's much older cousin. At least that was the implication on the age gap between those 2 that I got when Wally was the Flash and Wallace was his kid Flash during Rebirth, so that also makes it really weird. Number 4. Scarlet Witch and Loki. While this never fully came to fruition, it was such a weird and compelling flirtation, a dance, literally, that we witnessed between Scarlet Witch and Loki that I felt I had to share it with you. I feel like Loki and Wanda have had a bit of a spark now and then in the comics, but it came to a head more recently in the Scarlet Witch series by Steve Orlando and Sarah Pichelli, with Lorenzo Tometa in this issue as well. The issue in question is issue number 8 of the recent 2023 series. When Wanda is tasked with helping a mountain giant of Jotunheim, Arkin, who hopes to reclaim his honor and convince Loki to let him act as a leader for his people, she confronts the newly dubbed God of Stories, and during their dance, duel of honesty and flirtation, the 2 seemingly realize they have more in common than both of them and us, the readers, might at first suspect. However, in the end, Wanda ultimately decides that their relationship cannot proceed because she still cannot trust Loki to be honest with her, as she observes that he still sometimes struggles with being honest with himself. Honestly, touche. Number 3. Superman and Hope. Superman and Hope are a couple that most people don't think of when they think of Clark. This is because most people either think of Superman and Lana Lang, or more commonly Clark and Lois. Hope, however, was a recent dalliance that Supes had from his long-standing romance and now a rock of a marriage with Lois. She was a Green Lantern that Superman ran into when he was basically stranded away from home. The 2 had a romance that lasted honestly quite some time, but Hope, who was a Green Lantern, although at first she didn't know it, wasn't willing to part with Clark. And even when a viable way home was found for him, she actually fought to try and keep him by her side. However, he did make it home in the end, and of course made his way back to Lois and she to him, despite the strain Clark's time away put on their relationship. Number 2. Jean Grey and Pyro. Jean Grey and Pyro are a romance you definitely wouldn't expect to see in the comic. But in the first volume of the Marauders comic series, this couple did appear, albeit only in an illusionary world that Emma Frost basically created to prevent Yellow Jacket from fully infiltrating Krakoa. Instead, this This was a fantasy that Emma chose to feed the villain, who had hitched a ride inside Pyro following a run-in with Homines Verendae. In the illusion, Pyro returns to Krakoa where Jean is seemingly waiting for him. The two kiss before riding off in his sporty hot rod with the top down. Island life. Number 1. Martian Manhunter and Fire. Martian Manhunter is not a hero who is often known for his romances. This is because he mainly is known for one romance that ended so tragically that it seems it affected his ability to love, romantically at least, in the future. That would be the tragic loss of his wife, child, and often in many cases entire homeworld. Something John never really gets over in the comics. He's also often a stoic, calm figure whose personality just doesn't seem as well suited to romance or passionate love affairs in regards to his stories. However, in the DC Black Label comic Human Target, we learn of a surprising romance he has with the fellow Justice League International member, Fire, that actually very strangely works in regards to his character. His love affair with Fire plays on his own fear of the element of fire, and it seems he enjoys the pain, the fear, and kind of that rush from that experience. Pretty freaky, to be honest. The heated affair for Fire is more about using John, sadly, but as Martian Manhunter is an insanely powerful telepath, it seems likely that he knew this the whole time, but he was kind of just willing to accept that part of the relationship in exchange for some steamy, freaky nights.
Number 10. Baby Lois and Super Baby. Being transformed into a baby can be fun, I guess, at least in comic books. In issue 147 of Batman, Bruce Wayne becomes a baby for a bit, and Robin, well, Robin did not become a baby. That was the fun part. We have a baby and a not baby. Great. Now the businessman on the cover of the comic says, look out, it's Batbaby and Robin. Like, he's already okay with the fact that Batman is a baby. So this is normal in comic books. People turn into babies and it's fine. So Batbaby has the same strength as Batman, so it's funny. Now sometimes baby comic book action can get weird. In Superman's girlfriend Lois Lane issue 59, we see more babyverse. I mean, just the front page, what's going on here? Superman's getting spanked, he's having a great time getting spanked. Also, why is he an infant? I have so many questions. Well, in this comic, Super Baby is from an alternate reality and Superman is still around. He's just not around right now, because it's fun. So Lois ends up bringing home this baby alternate Superman, and it's fun and it's wacky and weird. I mean, it's kind of fun. Super Baby rips apart photos of Lois Lane and Superman, so Lois spanks him a lot, and she's like rolling her wrist out in between the spanks. It's, you know, casual day in the 60s, I guess. Things get even more weird when after the baby is returned back to his homeworld, he marries both Lois and Lana. What a weird day for the crew, all around. Number 9, Harley Quinn and Harley Quinn. Do you think if you met another version of yourself, you'd get along with them? Better question, do you think if you met another version of yourself, would you fall in love with them? Probably. If I saw these curls over there, I'd be like, oh, who is this? Getting seasick just looking at those curls, ayo. I feel like I'd get along with myself for like 3 hours and then get really annoyed. While this wasn't the case for Harley Quinn, however, when she met herself, she actually fell in love. We see it all go down in 2016's Harley's Little Black Book. From Amanda Connor and Jimmy Palmiotti, we get to see 6 issues where Harley teams up with other big hitters. Like one issue, she teams up with Superman, and another with Lobo, which looks cool. It's like straight from the 90s. It's great. Harley has to take on Superman, Muhammad Ali style, a lot of fun stuff in here. Things get unique when Harley meets herself in one of these fun alternate universes, and the two of them hit it off. This whole issue was trippy, but it left me wondering if I could ever fall in love with myself in real life. Would you guys get along with a version of yourselves, another version of yourselves? Let us know in the comments, I'm genuinely curious here. And before we continue on with this list, if you want to go ahead and give us a thumbs up while you're at it, that would be super awesome. Thank you so much for your support, especially while we're working from home still for a little bit longer. We're back in the studio soon. But in the meantime, thank you so much for your constant support. Let's get right back to this list. Number 8, Wonder Woman and Superman. Sometimes key intimate moments are hard to conceal when you have the powers that these people have. Specifically the Justice League. I mean, Wonder Woman and Superman, they're different. They're a bit stronger than our average folk. So after The Dark Knight Returns, Frank Miller decided to dive into an intimate moment with the two of them. Now, of course, they're superheroes, so this caused massive tidal waves, volcanoes are going off, people have to evacuate islands. It's a nightmare for everybody that's not Wonder Woman and Superman. They're like, great, looks like a good time. We have to leave our island now, so have fun. That's really good. This also isn't the first time Superman and Wonder Woman have been together either. See, DC Comics actually tried it back in Action Comics issue 600, but clearly it didn't work too well. Number 7, Superman and Big Barda. Ah, yes, the classic storyline, the Suicide Snare. Now, this issue was released with Action Comics number 593 back in 1987, so just 7 issues prior to what we just saw. So now we have Superman on the cover, but this time he's hooking up with Mr. Miracle's girl, Big Barda and Soups. How? Why? What? I have so many questions. What's going on here? Also, why is Mr. Miracle just watching? What is this? What's going on? Mr. Miracle, aka Scott Free, goes home to find Darkseid chilling on his couch, immediately asking where Barda is. Darkseid gives him a tape to play. So scary, the scariest thing ever, also. And he clicks play, and the tape is not America's Funniest Home Videos. No, the tape is Big Barda and Sleaze. Now, it's a little romantic, to say the least, the way that they're dancing and partaking with each other. It's, you know, I can't say it, but you know what's going on. They don't show it, but it's heavily implied some stuff. Now, the idea was that mind control Barda and Superman would bring in all the views, like a Jake Paul fight. If they bring in all the views, they get all this money to watch these two, and then that money goes towards them building a big army. I mean, sure, that's one way to make a buck. Maybe do an OnlyFans with Superman. Okay, sure. But I mean, if you can mind control Superman, maybe a magic show. I don't know, just an idea off the top of my head. I don't know, get creative. Throw a mustache on him and a cool hat. They're not gonna know it's Superman. They're gonna think that this guy's just levitating. That or mind-controlled Barda. It's like, weird. Number 6, Supergirl and Comet. There's no doubt that love is a major driving force with all of these superpowered beings, but some of the relationships here are just a bit too far-fetched and odd. It's kind of hard to follow when you can't get your mind off the fact that, I don't know, like the time Supergirl fell in love with Comet, her pet horse. Let's talk about that one. Now, it's a sapient horse with magical powers who at one point was actually a centaur in ancient Greece. So he wasn't always a horse, which makes it better. It makes it better, I think. I don't know, maybe. He was once a handsome warrior man, kind of. Now, of course, super animals aren't new to DC Comics. We also have Crypto the super dog, who came from Superman's past, Streaky the super cat, Beepo the super monkey. We have all the super pets, all the super animals. It's great. So Comet was this pet from the future. So he became Supergirl's pet, and then he became a human in Action Comics issue 301. This is big news. So what ended up happening now was a comet that was passing Earth, like an actual comet, now we get it, turned him into a human man named Bronco Bill, a rodeo star. Then Supergirl and Bronco Bill fell in love and dated for some time until he turned back into an animal. This has so many layers to it, so many layers of weird. Like, she made out with her horse, right? That's the thing we're talking about. That's the main idea, that she made out with her pet horse. Number 6, she made out with a horse. That's what it should be. Number 5, Killer Croc and Orca. Orca, aka Grace Ballin and Killer Croc. Now, I gotta say, they kind of seem like they're made for each other. They're giant, they're terrifying villains that I never want to run into, and the two get pretty close in the Injustice Elseworld stories. Because here, Killer Croc and Orca are actually married. Yeah, holy matrimony. Holy moly. These things are big, very big. What a loud wedding. It's nice when it starts off with just the two being married, you know? No mind control, nobody's gotta turn into a baby, just villains getting along in villain ways. Great. Plenty of fish in the sea, and Killer Croc chose an orca. How sweet. Things get even more serious in Injustice Volume 2, Issue 42. When Orca walks in, simply announces that she's pregnant, and the first response we hear is a well-timed spit take. And then Killer Croc stands up and he's like, well, I should probably go. And then everyone else is like, okay, Killer Croc, sounds good. What? Number 4, Aricia Rab and Hal Jordan. Pink Elephants is the title of issue 212 of Green Lantern Corps. We have Hal Jordan, and he's being eyed down by Aricia Rab. Now, the weird thing is, Aricia is only 13 years old. That's not okay. Now, the way they dodged this in the storyline was by having Aricia use her power ring to make herself older. But does that make it okay? No. It doesn't. Like, did readers see this and go, whoa, hold on, what are you talking? Oh, it's fine. That's fine now. No way. Aricia's like, hey, I loved you because you were the most handsome man I'd ever seen, and because you treated me like a real Green Lantern, even though I was young. Even Guy Gardner is watching like, I'm gonna throw up. I'm gonna throw up seeing this. This is gross. No, this is very gross. Even Hal Jordan's grossed out. He's like, okay, please don't, stop. We don't have to talk about. Don't remind me. And sorry for reminding you. Number 3, Superman and Maxima. Making her first appearance in Action Comics issue 647, Maxima is the oldest child of the royal family of Almerac. Now, she came to Earth in search for a suitable mate, of course choosing Superman, who you know, can do everything in the world. So she's like, yeah, super babies, let's do it. But like we saw with Wonder Woman, just because they were compatible doesn't mean it's gonna necessarily work. Superman rejected her offer, so she went and teamed up with Brainiac for a bit before ultimately turning against him and joining the Reformed Justice League. Now down the road, she again offered herself to Superman because, you know, she's a better person this time around. She went from being a villain, now she's on the good side. She's like, hey, I've changed. Wanna have 6 kids? But again, Superman said no. Besides, he was married to Lois Lane at this point, so it's just not in the cards. It's just not happening. Sorry, Maxima. But in Adventures of Superman Annual 3, we see her dream finally come true, tragically. Because after an untimely passing, Lois Lane wasn't necessarily in the picture anymore. Ooh, sorry. So Clark actually felt responsible for not being able to save her life. So he left Earth. He couldn't bear Earth anymore. Felt like he genuinely had no reason to stay on this planet. That's love. Heavy, but love. And while Superman was being attacked in space, Maxima came to the rescue. And Superman, well, he decided to stick around. Not having anywhere else to go, he figured, why not? So this escalated in the comics to a point where it's implied that the two eventually did have kids. So don't give up on love, guys, because they might leave their home planet and you might meet them. Number 2, Robin and Wonder Girl. This next one is absolutely insane, okay? So after the death of Superboy in Infinite Crisis, Robin's plan was to try and replace him with a clone using Superboy's corpse. Now, of course, that was way easier said than done, and this failed over and over and over again. So Wonder Girl walks in and sees Robin clearly frustrated at all these failures, and he starts to destroy all of these attempts of a clone. Guts everywhere, it's so gross, probably smells horrible. So they both ended up bonding over how upset they were at the loss of Superboy, and then with all the remains of the clones just laying all over the ground, they started to make out. So while they were still crying, they were kissing, they were bonding, there's guts everywhere. I mean, sure, that's normal to a degree, but like clean up the guts maybe, or go into another room where there's no guts of the person you're crying over, you know? Just an idea. Number 1, Beast Boy, Terra, and Deathstroke. Hey, 3 in 1, how lovely. So we met Terra when she was running away from a giant scorpion, and naturally the Titans came to the rescue to help. But help is not something she really needed per se. She was actually leading the Scorpion into a trap the whole time, where she would then use her powers to finish it off with a stone bridge collapsing. Now, when she introduces herself to the team, Beast Boy gets all shy, turns himself into a turtle, which is great, it's hilarious. She loves it, I love it, we all love it. Now, Terra and Beast Boy are close enough that Beast Boy convinces Terra to stay with the team and train. But during that conversation by the water, Terra accidentally moves a rock that Beast Boy is sitting on. So now it's implied that she can't really control her powers. This is a big deal. So the next day when she's being tested by the team, she kills it. She actually does really well. Then later on, Terra and Slade Wilson cross paths, and Slade explains how the team is just gonna get rid of her once they realize she can't control her powers, and that he can surely help with that. Okay, easy dude. So she tells him to beat it, and eventually she becomes a full member of the Titans. Now during a rendezvous with Beast Boy, they both cross paths with Slade Wilson, and then he reveals how Terra had just been a spy the whole time. And to make matters even worse somehow, in the Judas Contract storyline in the comics, one of the main reasons behind the betrayal is that she and Deathstroke were actually in love the whole time. Kicking off the list at number 10, we have She-Hulk and Thor. With the Eternals trailer dropping recently, this first couple might not be too far off in the MCU, it might just happen. When the final host of the Dark Celestials attacked Earth, Jen Walters was near where Eson the Searcher made landfall, and it telepathically called out to Jen for help. Now the Celestial gave Jen more gamma radiation after that, so she was stronger than ever at this point. Now cut to issue 8, she's a full-on savage. She's literally in savage mode, not just how the kids say savage. It's literally, she's a savage Hulk at this point. And by issue 11, she was pretty involved with Thor. Now it wasn't a great start to the relationship though, because Jen was actually fully convinced that Thor only desired her because of her newfound Hulk strength, and it wasn't actually Jen Walters that he was attracted to. Although he says otherwise, but it's a little sketchy. Number 9, Ultimate Hulk and his 39 girlfriends. The Ultimates are a pretty awesome time. In part 1 of this list, I mentioned Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch from the Ultimates, which was a little yuck, to say the least. The Ultimates are a little bit more risque, if you will. And in Ultimate Wolverine vs. Hulk, we see a side to the Hulk that's less angry and more, well, you probably can guess by the title that I said. Now it starts with Wolverine getting ripped into 2. He has to crawl himself back together. It's absolutely brutal. So Nick Fury has sent Logan to eliminate the Hulk, and so far it wasn't going as planned. clearly. After receiving a stool sample, Wolverine was able to track the Hulk down. Oh, and yes, he stitched himself back together. That happened first. Don't worry about that. So once Wolverine catches up to him in Tibet, he hears loud thumps. Now look, I know this technically isn't a couple, but it's too amazing to leave out, so of course I had to include this. Wolverine opens the door to this hidden temple, and behold, it's Hulk and his 39 girlfriends, maybe even more. I don't know, I kind of lost count, not gonna lie. It looks kind of cozy though. It's a nice atmosphere, it's good. And before we continue on with this list, if you want to give us a thumbs up on these videos, that would be great, because it really does help the studio out quite a bit, especially while we're still working from home. You all are the best. Thank you so much for your support. Let's get right back into this weird hookup list. Number 8, Wolverine and Amir. Wolverine has also been around the block too when it comes to hookups, okay? He's not getting out of this easy. Sometimes it's casual, like when Domino got involved with the Assassin's Guild and the Hand. She needed a way to get her mind off of these events, so friends with benefits with Wolverine sounded like the right thing to do, and it worked. They were both happy. It was great. But in Wolverine Volume 3, Issue 48, the friends with benefits thing hits a new low for Logan. Literally, he starts hooking up with an Atlantean for like 10 issues. She even says for Logan not to think about them hooking up in any romantic way, because Atlanteans don't have the same hang-ups that humans do when it comes to physical intimacy. Nice, okay. Logan says he wasn't really worried in the first place, he just happens to let out all his secrets because maybe, you know, he just feels like lately he has to tell someone. That's all. Logan's just a bit lonely. It happens. I'm pretty sure Logan just has a thing for Atlanteans. Don't lie, Logan. Number 7, Gwen Stacy and Norman Osborn. This one we couldn't leave out for part 2. I'm actually surprised that I didn't use it for part 1. Perhaps one of the more nightmare couples to hit the pages, the since past storyline begins in Amazing Spider-Man issue 509. And the main story is that Norman and Gwen, well, they had twins. It was revealed that before Gwen's death, the two of them had an affair. And the story is crazy. Spider-Man ends up fighting the twins, all the while he's having to deal with the fact that Gwen Stacy is dead. A lot of trauma in Spider-Man's pages. The amount of emotional baggage this poor kid must carry around. So Norman raised the kids, Gabriel and Sarah. And the thing is, they aged 3 times as fast as normal kids. So when I said Peter fought the kids, I didn't mean he's not going around boxing infants. No, these kids are older and they know how to fight. They're the masked vigilantes that actually attack Peter at the beginning when he's paying respects to Gwen in the first place. So he attacked him while he was visiting their mother. What a weird time. Apparently they were supposed to grow up to be this one big happy goblin family, which sounds like not a thing. That's not a thing. There's no such thing as a happy goblin family. So when Peter found this out, he was a little upset. Number 6, Black Panther and Monica Lynn. This one's pretty nuts. Okay, it just takes a turn out of nowhere. Oh my gosh, readers were just in shock with this one. So Monica Lynn first appeared in comics back in Avengers issue 73. She grew up in Georgia but moved to New York when she then met Black Panther and he saved her from the Sons of the Serpent. And in usual comic book fashion, they fell for each other and it was working out. It was actually a pretty good thing. It was great, so much so that Monica actually lived in Wakanda at one point. She was in the family. But then in Black Panther, Panther's Prey issue 4, he just calls off their engagement. Oh yeah, they were engaged, by the way. And then Black Panther's like, nope, no more. Just kidding. I don't know. I wasn't feeling it. No explanation, nothing. And then what makes this more even heartbreaking is that later on in Black Panther Volume 4, issue 16, Monica is seen again. This time she's performing. She's a great singer, and just like Adele, she is singing her heart out to a full crowd in Washington, D.C. She's killing it. She reflects through her lyrics on the heartbreak and the fact that Black Panther is now marrying Storm. Knew there was a reason behind his actions. Turning tragedy into art. That's commitment right there, folks. Number 5, Ant-Man and Beetle. In Ant-Man Last Days issue 1, we catch up with Scott Lang and he's at the club. He's just laying low. He's trying to get his dancing on. I don't know. He's trying to shake it off. He sees Beetle there, which is not good news because Beetle recently had fought Ant-Man back in New York. He's already in a bad mood. He said the club smelled like Axe body spray. He didn't want to be there in the first place. And now there's a villain there. He's like, all right, I gotta go report this to the authorities. Let's get this done. She thinks that he's stalking her at first, but it turns out they actually just live in the same neighborhood. So she explains to Scott that she's a rich, hot, half-Dominican girl with ties to organized crime, and this is where she goes to party, so it's not a surprise that she's there. You know, it's a hoot and holler in time when the dude in the background's yelling, Florida. That's how you know you're in a sick place. But she admits to Scott that she's attracted to the way that he fought back at Stark's place, you know, when she tried to kill Iron Man back when that happened. So they grab a drink and they chat about life and the Avengers and all that jazz. And then Scott reminds himself of something that Captain America told him. If you want to be an Avenger, you can't sleep with a supervillain. And the very next page, we can confirm that he did not follow that rule. Just a naked Scott Lang, just a dude with an APAC wearing an Ant-Man helmet. What a sight. What a sight to see. Number 4, Black Widow and Spider-Man. This one is Yeah, pretty weird. I'd say weird. In Marvel Team Up issue 82 titled No Way to Treat a Lady, the story begins with Nancy outside when a couple of punks try to steal her bag. Thankfully, Spider-Man comes in and saves the day. I mean, mostly. Nancy delivers the final blow, this time saving Spider-Man's back. So he sees the Black Widow suit in her bag, but she doesn't know what he's talking about. She doesn't think that she's Black Widow. She's convinced that she's this Nancy lady, although she very much is Black Widow. So Spider-Man offers her the suit in order to keep her warm, and then when she gets the outfit on, it of course fits perfectly. But again, this doesn't snap her out of it. She still believes that she's Nancy Rushman. And then in comes the S.H.I.E.L.D. strike force with plans to shoot Black Widow. Not good. So Spider-Man gets grazed by a bullet during all this madness. And just then there's a moment where Nancy's body acts by itself almost, like a reflex. She lunges towards the strike force member and takes them down with ease. Confused how she did so still. So they end up sticking together for a bit, and then in issue 84, Nancy decides that they're close enough and she goes in for the kiss. She likes him, but in Spider-Man's words, it was the wrong feelings in the wrong place at the wrong time, and I couldn't agree more. So in issue 85, her memory finally comes back to her, and after saving the day, Black Widow confesses to Peter that Nancy and him had something special, but she is in fact not Nancy. Close, Pete. Pretty close. Number 3, Winter Soldier and Black Widow. Around the time of the Cold War in the Soviet Union, Natalia trained Bucky Barnes in the Red Room alongside other students. She and Bucky hit it off. I mean, they had a lot in common. The whole Russian brainwashing, assassin skills, Natalia working for the KGB, the whole super soldier thing, they had a lot in common. It was dark stuff, but still stuff they had in common nonetheless. They were great for each other during this time. They made each other feel like they were more than just assassins. They found love, the true meaning of life. Then they get brainwashed, sent on a mission, break some necks, come back, forget about it all, and then fall in love again. It was a nice circle. So without knowing it, they both had quite the history in comics. And in the MCU as well, Natasha says a line to Bucky after he escapes in Civil War. She says, "The least you can do is recognize me." Now, is this her about getting shot from the brainwashed Buck earlier in Iran? Or perhaps will we see a flashback to her training days with Buck back in her solo flick? More Bucky, let's do it. Number 2, Captain America and Sharon Carter. If we're talking about relationships in the MCU, then perhaps one of the most weird ones to come out of it is Sharon and Steve. See, Captain America was in love with Peggy Carter since he was a little guy back in the war. And then years and years later, when he's an established Avenger, she's much older and they're still in love. Even until she passes away, they're still in love. And then the next movie, the dude's making out with Sharon at the airport, just like that. Even the actor who played Peggy, Haley Atwell, said at Comic-Con that she's not a fan of the new couple. She says, "I just feel like I wouldn't want to date my great aunt's guy. It just feels like it crosses an incestuous boundary, and Peggy just died." Yep, you couldn't have said it any better. In the comics, when Cap first went on a mission to take Batroc the Leaper down, Sharon was by his side and the two hit it off then. She's actually one of the first people to learn about his alter ego, fun fact. Cap is honestly insane in the MCU. I mean, Peggy and then Sharon, and then time travel again, and then Peggy again. The dude, like, just swipe left. There's so many fish in the sea, just swipe left. There's so many apps. Number 1, She-Hulk and Tony Stark. This one we can find in She-Hulk issue 17. It's pretty, she brings up a good point. So Tony at the time is a director of S.H.I.E.L.D. and Jen Walters at this point was an agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. And it all started with a debriefing. Now, it might have been the most unprofessional debriefing of all time. There were no PowerPoints, there were no conference calls, there was nobody else really. It was just Tony saying that he wanted to talk to Jen alone. It's really unprofessional. Clay Quarterman's upset about this, but he's only upset because he feels like he should be the one in there, if anybody. Just totally missing the point. The next few pages, it cuts to Jen and Tony in bed, just like earlier with Ant-Man and Beetle. Jen brings up a pretty good point here. She asked Tony that why when he sleeps around, everybody calls him a player and he's like Mr. Cool Dude with sunglasses, but when she sleeps around, she's called much worse things. She says it's a double standard, and honestly, I have to agree. But right before Tony can even respond, they're called to action when the ship is attacked. Well guys, there you have it. Sometimes these relationships aren't meant to last, but that's fine because all these superheroes fall in love like so much more in the comics. It doesn't even matter. If you get your heart broken, there's like 17 other superheroes that you're gonna date because these things last forever. They change their mind a lot. That's pretty much most of it. Kicking off the list at number 10, Tony and his suit. Okay, Tony and his crazy super suit are one unit. That's the whole point in the movie Iron Man 2. Tony was called to testify before the United States Senate Armed Services Committee, and Senator Stern demanded that Stark hands over his armor for military use. Now Tony responds saying that his suit and him are the same concept, and to give it over would be to turn himself over in a way, which is not gonna happen. It's part of him, right? So in Iron Man Volume 3, Issue 29, we see this part of him get a little bit weird. The suit became self-aware and it was jealous. They would have arguments like a real couple, and the suit wanted private time with Tony. It even said, it's like, hey, you wanna Want to get the hell out of here or what? So, like, imagine if your hoodie was like, hey, what do you say we get out of here? I don't know, this place is kind of crowded. The suit is obsessed with Tony, it's weird. So when Miss Fujikawa came by, the suit actually interrupted them. The suit didn't want them to talk or flirt or anything like that. He's like, sorry, hey, what? You should get out of here. Sorry, Tony, who is this? Let's get out of here. Now, of course, it ends in a cool Iron Man versus Iron Man type fight, but the tension between them was weird, and we kind of got this on screen, or we almost did, at least. In Iron Man 3, when Tony's suit woke him up and pushed Pepper off. That was weird. I was nervous that it was gonna be a this type scenario, but thankfully the whole movie was a mess, so it didn't really matter. Number 9, Scott Summers and Emma Frost. Cyclops loves the telepathic type, so this exact scenario could get him in quite the pickle. So after Emma became Scott's therapist, feelings came out, you know, getting in someone's head, literally and all, ought to happen. So she used her telepathic powers to enter Scott's mind and help him get through past traumas. Like, I don't know, when Jean Grey was killed in the Dark Phoenix saga, something like that, you know, that kind of stuff. Scott as well had a rough go when it came to mind control. It was a dark time for everybody. So when Emma entered Scott's mind to heal him, they ended up getting a little bit too close and then hooked up in their minds. Does that count? That counts. That definitely counts. Scott technically had an affair. I'm gonna count it as an affair. An affair with the resurrected Jean Grey that was later killed again, but this time she was killed for real later on. You know what, love is confusing at times, but you know it's not confusing. Giving this video a thumbs up because you guys are fans of the channel and you want to support us, and we do our best here. Even working from home, we still try and keep up with the videos. So thank you so much for being patient. We should be back in the studio so soon up here in Canada, but in the meantime, bless your souls. Let's continue on with this list. Hit that like button or subscribe, your pick. Let's continue. Number 8, Magneto and the Wasp. So in the original Secret Wars issue 3, one of the craziest parts is when Magneto and the Wasp had a one-night stand. We find this out and it's wild. The world's in ruins. She says Magneto's a great kisser. What's going on? So the whole thing is weird though. It's also really inappropriate. Let's talk about that. First of all, I mean, Janet doesn't really seem too into this idea, despite it being the only time to chase their desires. And then here's where things get even more messed up. Magneto was apparently drugged this whole time, so it was just a mess. It was revealed later from Jim Shooter, who wrote the series. He said Magneto was accidentally drugged, so he was extra lovey-dovey with Janet that night. Sure, we'll call it lovey-dovey. That's one word to say pushy and inappropriate. I mean, the entire thing's awkward and weird, but it feels like a good time to move on now, doesn't it? It sure does. Number 7, Nurse Annie and Havoc. So when a superhero gets injured, they gotta go to hospitals, just like the rest of us, okay? Sometimes bones break, your brains get rattled around, you forget stuff. It happens. They're only humans, kind of. I mean, sure, they can fire lasers out of their face, but they need some TLC. And in Uncanny X-Men issue 411, Havoc gets some of that TLC from Nurse Annie. Things come to a turn when she finds out the secret identity of her patient. So while Scott comes to get his brother, the two of them are left to themselves. She starts listing off all these things that she wants from Alex and she starts crying. Like, they're close, no doubt about it, but the feelings aren't going both ways at this point. And then when Scott arrives, she backs off, even offering to continue to take care of him, but Scott reminds her that before the mind stuff, he was very much in love with somebody else. And then even still, Annie's like, well, he'll need a nurse. No, she's committed, and it kind of worked, low-key. The next issue is all about Annie moving to the Xavier Institute. Also, she straight up despises the mutants, although she's there to see one, and her son is half one. Huh? She doesn't even want to help. She just wants to be close to Havoc this whole time. I mean, to be fair, she doesn't really get a chance to help because everyone's lashing out, but that's superhero stuff. People get pissed. And her ex-boyfriend was also the worst because her son is a half mutant. So she's like, oh, that guy sucks. But also, I'm a racist towards mutants. So finally, things get insane when Havoc comes back from this coma and he leaves Polaris for Annie. He was engaged to Polaris and he's like, you know what? No, this nurse clearly is into me. She has the hots for me. Also, this nurse was kind of into Iceman as well during this whole thing. He left Polaris at the altar for this nurse who was kind of seeing Iceman. What a mess. Number 6, Professor X and Moira McTaggart. Okay, so as we saw in the X-Men movies, they're pretty lovey-dovey and they've got a cute little nerdy relationship going on. James McAvoy, Rose Byrne, great actors. I would watch them on screen, do anything, they're so fun. It was super enjoyable to watch them, but now in the movies, he makes her forget a bunch of stuff for good reason, right? It even adds to the dynamic in a fun way because he bumps into her and he's like, hey, nice to see you again. Or, meet you, what? But in the comics, they were really close. And in X-Men 117, they even got engaged. Yeah, a little bit further than we saw on screen. So Moira ended up leaving Xavier, and then 10 issues later, she's now talking to Joe McTaggart, and it's revealed that she has a son with him. So somehow it's a bit more wild of a relationship in the comics than on screen. Somehow it's a bit more weird of a relationship in the comics than on screen, and he was making her forget stuff. So somehow, even though he's like, hey, forget everything, somehow that's less weird than what's going on in the comics. Number 5, Dazzler and Longshot. Okay, buckle up folks, this one's kind of tragic, actually, yeah. So Mojo World is an extra-dimensional and extra-temporal realm inhabited by the spineless ones, right? Now there's a ruler, of course, and his name is Mojo, and he produces movies, TV shows to keep their species, the spineless ones, entertained. Now Arise gave some of these civilians enhanced abilities, like Longshot, for example. He's now a superhero, cool. So Longshot has quite the history, or future, rather, or past? This is where it gets weird. Because Mephisto, that old devil, he sent back Shatterstar in time to the Mojoverse. And then he was discovered and experimented on by Ares, who created Longshot from Shatterstar's DNA. So later on, Longshot met Dazzler, Alison Blair, on a mission, spent some time on Earth with the X-Men, had a baby, and that baby was Shatterstar. The couple's memories were wiped and the child was sent 100 years into the future to fix the timeline. Mojo's like the grandmaster here a little bit. He's like, oh, they know each other, how lovely. It's actually a nightmare. Let's move on before my brain turns off, because these time loops mess me up. Number 4, Angel and Psylocke. Speaking of X-Men, this one is also tragic. Nice. Weird, but tragic still. Elizabeth Braddock and Warren Worthington III both became Horsemen of Apocalypse in X-Men Apocalypse. It was a pretty big deal when they turned into Horsemen of Apocalypse, but in the comics, they were much closer after this time. In X-Men Volume 2, Issue 29, Return to Hellfire, so Archangel comes to the rescue a couple times, so naturally there's feelings in the air. But this couple has had some messed up moments. I mean, for one, Warren broke up with Betsy because he saw her flirting with Thunderbird. Fully broken up, no conversation. He's like, no, I saw that. We're now not in a relationship anymore. That's worth it. That's what this is worth. Okay, and then during Uncanny X-Force, he became Archangel, heir to Apocalypse. But in the comics, Betsy had to kill him during this time. Then afterwards, he was reborn with amnesia, and Psylocke and Magneto would control this empty vessel of a man. So he was Angel, and then he was Archangel, and then he had to get killed by his lover, and then he came back to life, and then his lover possessed his body. Kind of. Possessed? That's a fair word for it. Number 3, Black Widow and Tony Stark. The Ultimates, home of the weird. Okay, here we go. Ultimates 3, Issue 1 opens with this shot. It's the Ultimates just hanging out in Tony's mansion, and there's a tape playing in the background. Is it Superman and Big Barda? No. Is it America's Funniest Home Videos? I sure wish. That tape was Iron Man and Black Widow, you know, working stuff out. Well, in the Ultimates 2, her and Iron Man dated and even got engaged, so it's not totally random, but it is all lies. That's right, it's all fake. Turns out Black Widow hadn't actually found love after all, rather she was trying to destroy the Avengers for the fall of the Soviet Union. Good old-fashioned revenge. She doesn't get too far because Hawkeye, you know, like a lot of times actually. But what a cruel way to get betrayed. I mean, love and then lies? Oh, horrible. Even Stark's butlers were watching the film like, damn. Number 2, Nightcrawler and his adopted sister. Yep, you heard me absolutely correctly. Okay. Nightcrawler and Jermaine Sardos. Imagine dating somebody and then finding out that they've actually been your adopted sister the whole time. What a twist! That's exactly what happened to Kurt Wagner. Poor Kurt. Well, not really. He kind of loved it. Let's talk about it. So Kurt grew up with Jermaine Sardos. He was adopted by her and her mother, and they of course became close, being new siblings and all. But then things get amazing. Okay, so Kurt started dating a woman named Amanda Sefton, and she turned out to be Jermaine in disguise. Hashtag surprise. Now, normally when you would find out something like this, you'd be a little thrown off, maybe even upset, because there's lies, and also it's like a relationship with a sister and a relationship with not an adopted sister. It's different. Is this weird? This is weird, right? This is in a weird list. Part 3, this should have been in part 1. This is weird. I would assume Nightcrawler would be upset, but he's actually totally cool with it. He's like, hey, I'd be more demonstrative about it, but I don't want to set a bad example for Kitty Pryde, you know? And finally, number 1, Scarlet Witch and Doctor Doom. We'll finish with Avengers: The Children's Crusade mini-series, where we have the young Avengers looking for Wanda because, well, her son Wiccan, he started to experience reality-altering powers, so we wanted to check in with Mama Bird just to make sure everything was good, and also to make sure reality itself hasn't shifted or changed. So we found out that she was being held at Doom Castle, so after a quick rescue trip, he discovers her and Doom in matching colors. Interesting. Turns out she's planning on marrying Doctor Doom, and she doesn't remember her origin or anything like that. All she knows is that she's in love with Doctor Doom. So Wiccan tries the obvious. He's like, nope, you're the Scarlet Witch, you're married to Vision, you had 2 kids. Hi. let's snap out of this, shall we? She thought that the two kids were dead, but lo and behold, Wiccan is alive, and before we can even finish explaining what happened, Doom steps in to shut him up. It's a nightmare scenario that you gotta check out for yourself. The Avengers Children's Crusade, issues 1 to 9, super fun. Kicking off the list at number 10, we have Squirrel Girl and Wolverine. Doreen Green made her comic book debut in Marvel Superheroes Volume 2, issue 8. See, back in the early 90s, she was born with these fantastic squirrel abilities, including a tail to complete the picture. In the new Avengers Volume 2, Issue 7, the two of them have a brief interaction that hints that they could have been romantically involved at one point. There's some tension in the air, that's for sure. They're talking about being professional and also how amazing they look too. That's already enough evidence in my mind, but to make things even more interesting, later on in Wolverine Volume 4, Issue 8, Doreen is seen in Wolverine's mindscape with Emma Frost, Mystique, Spiral, and Jewel. This was the sexual fantasies room, so, I mean, proof's in the pudding, guys. Number 9, Crystal and Quicksilver. In Fantastic Four, issue 45, Johnny Storm met Crystal, sister of Medusa, and they hit it off naturally. Johnny thought she was straight out of a fairy tale, and once they showed each other their powers, well, love. Love comes next, of course. The Fantastic Four needed a replacement temporarily while Sue was recovering from having their first child, so this Inhuman, Crystal, was looking to fill that spot. So Johnny and Crystal dated after this, and Crystal was front cover by time Fantastic Four issue 81 rolled around. And then in Avengers 104, after a battle with a Sentinel, Quicksilver gets hurt. So Crystal brought him back to her homeworld to heal him, and while they were there, the two of them ended up kind of falling in love. Everything happens fast in Pietro's life. If I was Johnny, I'd have a few choice words for him, that's for sure. And before we continue on with this list of weird superhero couples, if you want to go ahead and give this video a thumbs up, that would be awesome. It really does help us a lot, especially while we're working from home. Those thumbs up really add up and help us out. You guys are the best, thank you so much. Now let's get right back into this list. Enough of wasting time. Number 8, Toad and Husk. When Toad was amongst the lucky few to have kept their powers after the events of M-Day, he didn't save the world one day at a time. Instead, he became a janitor at the Jean Grey School for Higher Learning. He kept the school clean, he kept the kids on track. And then when the Phoenix Force approached Earth, Quentin Quire fell from the sky and Toad leaped far and wide to catch him. This impressed Husk quite a bit. So she quit the school thinking Kitty would just fire her anyways, and then she joined the Hellfire Academy later on, and she kind of made Toad betray the school once they started clicking. She's a little aggressive in her ways, some would say. Relationships have their ups and downs, but this is just another level. Because at the end of this 5-part roller coaster of emotions, Paige didn't even remember the entire thing. Poor Paige. And also poor Toad. I mean, he's gripping that mop tighter and tighter every day. All 5 parts are really fun. This relationship is nuts. I'd love to have Toad come and clean my place, just hang out, keep me in line, you know, he'd be nice. Number 7. Thor and Jane Foster. When it comes to Norse mythology, Thor's wife is Lady Sif. Now in the comics, it's a bit more complicated than that. They were on and off for a while, and I feel like we're gonna get a love triangle in the MCU soon. I mean, it's confirmed that Lady Sif and Jane Foster are both returning in Thor: Love and Thunder. So this could lead to a little triangle of romance, who knows? In Journey into Mystery issue 102, Thor had fallen in love with Lady Sif, so much so that when Sif had been kidnapped by storm giants and ended up as a prisoner of Hela, Thor volunteered as tribute. He actually wanted to trade lives, and Hela was so impressed, she was like, you know what, I'm just gonna let you both go. That's love. I don't know what to do here. And then in Thor issue 236, Sif sacrificed her own life in order to save Jane's. See, Jane in the comics became Thor, but her cancer got worse every time she got mighty and used the powers of Thor. So maybe the reality gem in the MCU has caused some life-altering effects to Jane, and then Lady Sif can somehow be the only one to save her at the end of Thor: Love and Thunder. Wouldn't that be sad? That would be sad, actually. Yeah, that'd be kind of pretty sad. I say this is a weird couple because the MCU has treaded lightly around it. Why Jane is the love interest at all beats me. I mean, the long distance alone, that would be enough for me to be like, nope, bye. Number 6, Kitty Pryde and Colossus. When people say age is just a number, that's like a couple years we're talking about. Maybe you're in your late 20s, you meet somebody in their early 30s. It's not that far off, but it sounds far off. That's what we're talking about when we say age is just a number. When it comes to Marvel romances, the whole age thing is a little gross. It's kind of gross. When the first two met in X-Men issue 129, she's said to be like 13 years old. They're trying to recruit her to go to Professor X's school, and Colossus is like 18 at the time, or somewhere around 20. He's like an adult. Now, in the Days of Future Past storyline, beginning in X-Men issue 151, we see Kitty and Colossus married in that future. So that's nice, I think. It's nice to know that they really are head over heels for each other. It kind of helps, especially when it started with their first kiss during a space mission, and right before they kiss, Kitty even says, gee, I wish I was older, and Colossus is like, so do I. and then proceeds to kiss her anyways. Number 5, Iron Man and Gamora. If you put 2008 Tony Stark in a room with Gamora, like pre-pepper pots, I guarantee you that guy would at least turn on the charm. The idea doesn't come out of nowhere though. I mean, Tony and Gamora, believe it or not, have hooked up before. So the panel starts with Gamora being all coy and cool. She says the line, "Well, you're gonna have to do much better out here." And Tony responds in his classic Tony Stark manner, "I can do better." And then it immediately cuts to Tony laying next to her in bed. They look like they just had the time of their lives. Tony's all tucked in the blanket. He looks shell-shocked. Gamora's pretty chill about it. She's like, "Hey, I'm gonna go back to the bar. See ya." And then Tony's like, "Cool, true." And then after she leaves, Tony lets out the slightest, "Ow." Yeah, you don't say. It's probably gonna be a painful one. Number 4, Spider-Man and Black Cat. Peter Parker and Felicia Hardy, one of the more interesting relationships in Peter's life. Well, rather, Spider-Man's life. And there's a difference here between the two. You'll see. So she entered comics back in 1979 with Amazing Spider-Man issue 194. Now, when she met Spider-Man, they were, of course, both in costume. She fell for him, his charm, his quips. She could tell that he was a kind soul, and she trusted him. It was turning into quite the romance between the two, and eventually Peter felt like the time was right and revealed his true self. He unmasked himself. And she had a tough time accepting the fact that he was just an average kid under the mask. Should have left the mask on, Pete. Rough. I mean, looks really don't matter, but when you're a superhero, it's probably different. This is taken to the next level in the Ultimate Comics. When Black Cat finds out that Spider-Man's just a kid, she literally throws up all over him. So sometimes it's better to keep things a mystery, I think. Number 3, Wolverine and Lin's son. This next one happens in the 4-parter Wolverine Manifest Destiny. So when Wolverine was in Chinatown, San Francisco, he saved a woman named Lin from the crime lord, the Black Dragon. Now she refers to him as her lover in issue 3. Things are cooking, nice. Now what Wolverine doesn't realize is that by successfully taking out the Black Dragon, which he did, Logan now has to take that spot. He becomes that role. So naturally he refused, but by refusing, that upset Lin. To quit would be dishonorable to everybody. So while he was leaving, she stabbed him in the eye with a spear, warning him not to return. So when the X-Men relocated to San Francisco, he took a trip down memory lane and returned, but this time Lin was not the same. "Lin is dead, lover," she says. "You killed her a long time ago." And she goes on to explain how now she is the Black Dragon, Queen of the Triads, Empress of the Chinatown underworld. Wolverine took over as the new Black Dragon, and Lin escaped through the sewers, holding the same spearhead. Number 2, Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver. Of course I'm gonna mention this couple on this list. From the Ultimate Universe, this is one of the weirder ones. In the 3rd issue of the Ultimates, the Wasp is like, "Man, those two sure do love each other, those siblings." And then Cap's like, "Well, of course they do. They're family, they're siblings." Even in the 1st issue, like way back in the original X-Men, Pietro tells Toad to stop chewing so loudly in front of his sister. They're close. But in the 3rd issue, the Wasp is like, dude, he loves her. Like, loves her. And then Captain America makes the same face that readers did at that point. Yeah, that's a weird one. Number 1, Wolverine and MJ. The Ultimate Universe has some interesting elements, as we just heard, and after Ultimate Spider-Man issue 66, it got even more weird when Wolverine and Spider-Man switched bodies. Mesmero switched their bodies, so Peter was like, "Hey man, I really need you to go to school. We've seen these Freaky Friday change-up style movies before. The whole fun is pretending to be the other person and trying to blend in with their lives." That's where the comedy comes from, right? This sounds like a hilarious adventure ready to happen, but while Wolverine was in Peter's body, he at one point ended up kissing Mary Jane. And it's made out like he even wants to date her, like he wants to go further after the kiss. MJ told him that she wants to wait until they're older for that kind of thing though, so thankfully, nothing happened during this change up. But the kiss and the idea in the first place, yuck, you know? Yuck. I was gonna save Hulk Gang for number 1, but creepy Wolverine takes the cake.